Okay, those who would have read the email about this, Raj, my colleague from the Cancer Council, is presenting, and I'll be chipping in a little bit. So it's a real privilege to be presenting with Raj, and the reason why we're doing this, I've had a long association with the Cancer Council, working with them on grants over many years now, and it's just been a fantastic learning experience for myself. It's one of those things where I think I've got back a lot more than what I've put in from being associated with them. As you know, the topic is about cancer, and we've tweaked things slightly, and it hasn't been difficult just to make it relevant to us, to give it like a social feel about it, even though there will be lots of stats and a bit of medical jargon and that sort of thing. It's not too hard to see, and it's cancer as it relates to Indigenous people, so the fact that we have such a strong interest in Indigenous health and well-being. And it's not too difficult, I think, for most of you to realise that with cancer, it's not just purely a medical thing, there is that psychosocial element to it, about prevention and optimising treatments and getting people to take better care and better interests in themselves and that sort of thing. Not wanting to take away too much of the thunder from the presentation, but one of the big things in this whole the research we've done is convincing Indigenous people, and also what we say about Indigenous people I guess applies to a lot of people from low SES backgrounds as well, but communicating to Indigenous people that cancer is not a death sentence. And for many people out there, there's that people who are not aware, don't have the health literacy. For them, cancer is that thing you get and you die from it. And so one of the things we are very interested in is getting that message out that a lot can be done, and there's been remarkable improvements in both prevention and treatment of cancer.
So to start off with, we're going to show a little video that we've had created. I mean, part of the reason for doing this project was not only just to do it as an academic exercise, but also to give back to the community and to put our information, our findings into ways that community and lay people could understand as well. So part of that was to translate our findings not just into papers, which, as we know as academics, 50 people might read, or into a report that nobody will read, but to also turn into videos that hopefully everybody can understand and access. So we've done that, and this is just one of the videos we've done. We've done about 10 videos so far, a lot of them, and in fact all of them are using Aboriginal people, not a single non-Aboriginal face in there, not even mine.
The Aboriginal Patterns of Cancer Care, or APOCC project, came about really because of two gaps, one in the research world, one in the community. There really is this belief that cancer is a death sentence, or even that it can be contagious, so there's a need to bring cancer into the light and start talking about it. A lot of Aboriginal people, once they've gotten a cancer diagnosis, really don't know what to do and can be quite scared to seek treatment. And this is because of the lack of discussion. This silence really allows fears and misconceptions to grow, and that can be very dangerous. In doing this research, we engaged a number of Aboriginal researchers and advisors. We have Anthony Dillon, who's a very well-respected researcher with a lot of experience in data management and collection. We also have Auntie Claire Jackson, who's our cultural advisor, and she's also an author on a number of our papers. As well as Anthony and Claire, we have an Aboriginal advisory group. They make sure that everything we disseminate is culturally appropriate and relevant.
One of the good things about this project is we're not just doing research on Aboriginal people, but it's a collaborative process. We have Aboriginal investigators working with us, and they bring their skills and expertise along to the project. It opens doors, it facilitates processes, it makes it easier for the people and their family affected by cancer. So it's seen very much as a partnership, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people working together. It's not just white fellas doing research on Aboriginal people, but it's Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people working together on a project that affects them all.
It's pretty clear to us as Aboriginal people why this is beneficial, why Aboriginal people would talk to Aboriginal interviewers. Because we don't have to explain ourselves. I look at young Erin in the team here, and I know she knows what I'm talking about. I don't have to say, this is because my dad was something or other, or my mum was a stolen generation, therefore she missed out on this and this. I don't have to say that to these people, to other Aboriginal people, because they know. Sometimes you say something in Aboriginal company or mixed company, and the other Aboriginal person will just put their arm around you because they know you're referring to something that is actually painful. But how we gathered the factual information was that a team of us Aboriginal researchers went out with permission all around New South Wales and interviewed cancer patients, Aboriginal people in cancer treatment, their families and carers, and healthcare workers. And from all those interviews, we put them together and pulled out major trends that they were talking about, major needs, the main things that were mentioned many, many times.
The importance of this project is that it's highlighted for us that the cancer journey, or what we've discovered, is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of other factors there that need to be addressed. And so having that insight and then enables us to take important messages to governments so that they have some hard data, not just based on hearsay, but we've actually spoken with people, their families, their carers. So we have a better insight of what's happening with people in the cancer journey. So we can use that information to develop more effective policies, target those areas that need addressing, hopefully with the expectation of a better outcome for all concerned.
So what we're really hoping is that the research we have done, which is factual, we can point to it, the anecdotes that have been told to us, and the tools we get up, like a DVD and a website, which is being worked on at the moment, that we can get this out to the communities, reduce the fear and the stress, and help to bring about a better outcome.
On behalf of the APOCC team, I would like to thank all Aboriginal people who contributed to the APOCC project. As we share our knowledge, learning, teaching and research practices, may we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever in the Aboriginal custodianship of this country.
Does anyone know what the average age of an Aboriginal person in New South Wales is? Want to guess?
50 something?
22. Right? So that's why we sort of aimed this sort of our dissemination and our communication at a very young audience. So we've put up, we do a lot of Twitter, we do quite a bit on Facebook, and of course we have this website now, a web portal we call it, which is a one-stop shop for all information on cancer and Aboriginal people. So I'm going to go through now and talk a little bit about the project and the findings that we've had. And so if you've got questions along the way, please put your hand up. But and I'll try and just lead you through a bit about why we did things and what we found. So a little, just very quick background. Cancer is actually the second leading cause of death for Aboriginal people in Australia after cardiovascular disease. But yet it's one of those ones very rarely talked about. Certainly when we first started this project, very rarely talked about, even though it has such a large impact on families and communities. And mainly people in the news, you hear about diabetes, kidney disease, these sorts of things. But cancer really is there. And unfortunately, it probably will be the leading cause of death within the next 5 to 10 years. And we didn't want it to wait for that long, actually, before something was done about it. So that's what part of it was started the project. And an Aboriginal person in New South Wales is 60% more likely to die from the cancer than a non-Aboriginal person. So same cancer, Aboriginal person is 60% more likely to die than the non-Aboriginal person with the same cancer.
Is that because of reluctance to seek treatment?
Well, that's exactly what we wanted to find out. These are possible reasons. We didn't know why. We knew the facts of those things did exist. We didn't know why. So we really thought way back when that these are possible reasons. Perhaps there were practical and logistical barriers to accessing healthcare. As we know, Aboriginal people have more what we call comorbidities, have more chronic diseases in association with their cancer. So often, sometimes cancer, strangely enough, can be a lower priority to be treated than, say, their cardiovascular disease or the chronic pulmonary disease at the time. We felt that the anecdotal evidence at the time that there was a lower health literacy amongst Aboriginal people, in particular in relation to cancer. And again, there may be some, anecdotal evidence, mainly qualitative information about Aboriginal people having certain cultural beliefs and fears about cancer, is what it came down to. And also fears and mistrust about health systems in general. And you can see that in the fact that, generally speaking, the evidence we'd seen at the time would be that Aboriginal were less likely to go to screening, more likely to delay their diagnosis, and therefore having later diagnosis and lower treatment uptake, mainly because there were less options available to them because of a later diagnosis. Okay. So what do? This is our sort of our representation of the cancer journey. When you think about a person being diagnosed with cancer, really we want to know about, generally speaking, in our world, if you get a worse outcome, like lower survival or higher mortality, it's due to two factors usually. One is later diagnosis, so you've got less treatment options available, or if you are diagnosed at a reasonable time, lower treatment uptake. So they're the two things we thought about. So we did two studies. One was what we call pathways to diagnosis, which looked at the barriers and enablers to people getting diagnosed at a reasonable time frame, at an early stage of the cancer. And Anthony will talk a little bit about that later. And then we did what we call a patterns of care study, where we looked at people, once they're diagnosed, what actually happens to them? Are they getting the best possible care? Is the best possible care offered to them in the first place? And then, if it is offered to them, what's their chance of actually taking it up? So these are the sort of things we looked at from a quantitative point of view. And in conjunction with that, we also did a set of qualitative interviews that was done for us by a group at the University of New South Wales, looking at the whole cancer journey, looking at from diagnosis or pre-diagnosis even, from the time a person feels healthy all the way up to diagnosis and after that, and their experience and what they felt was were the good things, the bad things, and things that really might have helped them along if they were available. So I'm going to move on to an example from what we call the patterns of care side, looking at the treatment. So once you're diagnosed, what happens to you? And I've chosen prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is an interesting cancer. It's probably become close to the biggest issue in cancer at the moment. And so I thought it was one that might be interesting to look at. If you look at it over time, over the last 20 years or so, you can see here up at the top here, this is what we call incidence. This is the number of cases being diagnosed per 100,000 population. And so from 1982, so it was 30 years ago, we had a rate of about 80. And then we see this huge spike up there to 180 around about, it's about the mid-90s or something like that. And that's due to the introduction of what we call prostate-specific antigen testing, which is a blood test that can be done very easily at a GP's office, and it can pick up prostate cancer at a very, very early stage. And some would say almost too early. And so that caused this huge spike up in incidence in the mid-90s. And we thought then after that it might fall back down to roughly the pre-90s level. And it did start to come down again, as you can see here, around the late 90s, around 1997 to early 2000s. But then it's now jumped up again to it's gone up, went up above the mid-90s levels, and now it's probably about the mid-90s levels now still. And that's, again, a change in technology where core biopsy technology, we're hitting leaps and bounds, and suddenly we're finding tiny, tiny little cancers that perhaps would never affect a man's lifetime, a man's health in his lifetime. And you can see that too, that even though there's wild fluctuations in incidence over time, the mortality, the green bit down the bottom, has barely changed. Right? So we've got literally hundreds of thousands of men being diagnosed, being treated as if they've got a life-threatening disease, but in fact getting what we call over-treated. And so it's caused a huge controversy in the mainstream population, and it makes the interpretation of what we find next in the Indigenous population or Aboriginal population a little bit tricky, but I'll try and lead you through it. So from what we have from the national data, prostate cancer is now the second most commonly diagnosed cancer in Australia, and the second most common cause of cancer death in males after lung cancer. But generally speaking, the 5-year survival is very good. It's 93%. In America, where this trend that you saw before is even more pronounced, the 5-year relative survival is 100%. Right? So that means you get diagnosed with disease, you still, in fact, in some parts of America, it's hard to imagine, but the survival rate is above 100%. Right? Try and think about what that means.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? That means that men who are getting diagnosed are onto a pathway of healthcare, and so they're getting other things picked up before they get a chance to affect them. So they're actually getting better care because they've been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so the men who are in the general population not getting diagnosed with prostate cancer are actually faring worse. So you get this gap. It's very strange. So generally speaking, it's not a good example of what you should do when you're trying to find a cancer, but it's an interesting thing, and it's probably the biggest issue we'll probably face in the next 10 to 15 years in terms of space for hospital beds and treatment facilities, surgery and radiotherapy in particular. So really our aim was to try and understand the difference in prostate cancer treatment and in particular surgery. Surgery is the main treatment for prostate cancer, and then what the effect is on survival between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal men in New South Wales. We examined the other factors to try and see if the effects, the differences between Aboriginal men and non-Aboriginal men is really just a function of age, stage of disease, socioeconomic status, and comorbidities, and as well as place of residence. They're the things we sort of try and think. Because often that's what you hear is that, the difference between Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal is just because they live in remote areas, or they're in low socioeconomic status, live in low socioeconomic situations. And we did this using data linkage. We linked all cancer registry records, that's what CCR stands for, with all hospital admission records, those time periods, and death records. And we published this just this year in fact, if you want to look it up. The other thing we've also tried to do with all our publications, they're all open access. So if we put an article into a closed access journal, we've paid for it to be open access. So if you're interested in looking at any of them, you can download them for free. They're also on our website as well. So when we try and look at Aboriginal people compared to non-Aboriginal people with prostate cancer, you can see here, if you look at it by age diagnosis, really not much difference. Generally speaking, the Aboriginal men are a little bit to the left on that. They're in the blue and they're on the left of that graph, so they're slightly younger, but not significantly younger. In terms of place of residence, they are more likely to live in the sort of more remote areas. And less likely to live in major cities. terms of socioeconomic disadvantage, we have over half of Aboriginal men living in the lowest socioeconomic areas. And in comorbidities, there's a fairly stark sort of differences there where they're more likely to have diabetes, cardiovascular disease, chronic pulmonary disease, renal disease, and in fact, almost significant for all other conditions combined. When we look at the stage of diagnosis, which is again a very strong prognostic indicator of what sort of treatment you are and how likely you are to survive, the differences are not huge, in fact. In fact, they're not statistically significant, which is interesting because, again, we often hear stories of Aboriginal men waiting, to the last possible minute to get diagnosed. We don't see that here in our population-based data we have here. But in terms of treatment, you can see here, for the localised or the very low stage disease, the ones on the left there, there are significantly less likely to get surgery for their prostate cancer. It's about the same for regional, which is sort of the next stage up. When we do our little logistic regression, we're looking at trying to understand and adjust for all those differences in socioeconomic stage, age, place of residence, stuff like that. If you look at just the straight unadjusted rate, you can see here that Aboriginal men, the odds of Aboriginal men getting surgery for their prostate cancer is about 42% less than that of non-Aboriginal men. We adjust for age, it goes down a little bit. Year of diagnosis, spread of disease, it's gone down a little bit. Then we add in all these other variables, socioeconomic disadvantage, comorbidities, and finally place of residence, and you find we're pretty much back to where we started. So really, adjusting for all those things made very little difference at all. So there's something else going on here beyond these things that we've measured. Okay. When we look at survival.
So, Raj, I just wonder, does that point, is it possibly just being Aboriginal biology? Maybe it's just comes down to biology. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, look, a lot of people bring that up. Honestly, the two answers to that, it could be, and the second answer is we'll never know. Probably, we'll never know. It's unlikely.
Could you go back and show us the things that you controlled for the last slide? Yeah, that's a pretty extensive set of things.
That's about as much as we can measure.
Yeah.
The data that we have.
With the data we have.
Yeah. But I mean, even if you were, even if you could wave a magic wand, it's not clear what else you would want to get to.
In most cases, for most cases, these are the things that influence diagnosis, treatment, all those sorts of things. In fact, so they're generally the things that you would expect. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Just to make sure I understand, this is the odds ratio for people seeking this treatment.
No, of getting the treatment.
Sorry, of getting the treatment.
Yep.
Amongst those people who have been diagnosed.
Correct.
Okay, so that's got nothing to do with biology.
Right.
No, probably not. Yeah.
Okay, good point.
I mean, I'm struggling to see how that would happen.
Yeah.
But survival or diagnosis, that's a separate story that potentially could be to do with biology.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there has been some discussion about the fact that maybe Aboriginal people get a faster growing type of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a biological thing. And therefore, when they get to this stage, they're not able to get treatment. So
But you've adjusted for that.
Yeah.
You've adjusted for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so survival, you can see here, there's quite a gap between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal men. Sorry, this is mortality, I've flipped it around. So you can see here after 5 years, the mortality for Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal men down the bottom, the smooth sort of light blue line, is about 10%, whereas about almost 20% for non-Aboriginal, for Aboriginal men, sorry. That's for all stages combined. And you can see here that the gap actually starts from day one. It starts from the very beginning. With other cancers we've done, it doesn't look like that. There's generally, for most of the other cancers we've seen, it's about the same for the first 18 months and then we get a gap. And that's possibly a treatment-related thing. But
Those are unadjusted or adjusted?
this is unadjusted. So when we look at the hazard ratios, we start off with an unadjusted hazard ratio of about 1.8. And then again, we go through the same process of adjusting for all those covariates. And we end up with, sorry, I'll just flick through the punchline. We still end up with about 1.5 times the risk of death at the end after adjusting for all those things. So yeah, so there's a lot that we can't explain. So that's one of the unfortunate things about this project. The only fortunate thing is that sometimes we end up with more questions than we do answers. Right? We do rule out a bunch of things, so we know that it's probably not all these things we've adjusted for, but what it is, that's the question. And that's part of the thing that maybe we can talk about next, and that's really where the qualitative work and the pathways to diagnosis work that Anthony's talked about and the scale we've developed.
So, Raj, that spread of disease there, that's at the time of diagnosis or at the time?
At the time of diagnosis.
Is there a possibility that Aboriginal men are getting diagnosed at a certain time and then waiting a longer period of time before they get the surgery, and that accounts for it? Would that be a possibility?
Look, generally speaking, the time to surgery between diagnosis and surgery is about the same. Right? It's about the same. The problem is, I guess, part of it is also our way of measuring stage is quite crude. So we have this localized regional metastatic unknown. And in fact, in prostate cancer, almost 50% of men are unknown. And so there may be some variation in there that we're not able to capture, just because the pathology and the science is not up there to try and differentiate it. In fact, that's probably the $64 billion question is how can we differentiate the non-aggressive, non-life-threatening prostate cancers from the ones that are aggressive and life-threatening.
Make a lot of money if you can figure that out.
Yeah, and then there are lots of people trying to make lots of money out of that at the moment. There's a huge industry about it. But it will save the health industry a lot by not putting those men through these horrible treatments. And in fact, in prostate cancer, unfortunately, the treatment is often a lot worse than the disease.
Isn't it true that the diagnostic tools are really crude? And
Yes.
so that the false alarm rate, I mean, it was my understanding that in the US they're even deciding not to do lots of stuff.
Correct.
because
And that's,
it's so-
that's in fact based on our work.
Yeah.
Not me personally, but my colleague, that what we call sensitivity is very, very low.
Yeah.
And so it pushes men through a whole bunch of diagnostic pathways and treatment pathways they don't need to go through. And so, yeah, the most recent recommendations from the people that make these recommendations, the Health Preventive Task Force in America, is to not give out this PSA testing and really wind it back as much as possible. But really, for the last 10 years, that's the battle we've been fighting, to try and be more moderate in the use of it. It is a useful tool, but in only certain circumstances. Part of the problem is women have breast screening, women have cervical screening. There's nothing really for men. Men go, we need something, we need screening. We want to get screened, but it's now being screened, but it's a poor tool to start off with.
So if you go back to that sort of the 5-year survival rate of American men,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to have a look at their well-being levels.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're probably...
But that's the work that we've done that's really driven those. That sure, on this thing, their survival's great, their mortality's low, but their health, their quality of life is extremely poor. Extremely poor.
And unnecessarily so for many of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a balance, you know, it's one of those things where we've done a lot of stuff, health economic evaluation, you know, would you trade off a lifetime of incontinence against a small chance of dying from prostate cancer? You know, those are the sort of things we've got to try and figure out. And most men will say, not so sure. You know, or lifetime with a whole bunch of other side effects, should I say. Yeah.
Anyway, with the qualitative approach, which I had very little to do with, by the way, we've got good qualitative researchers working for us. But the reason why I want to talk about this was it just emphasises the importance of that mixed methods approach to this. We've seen all the stats and that sort of thing. About 6 months ago, I was reading over the final draft of a paper which we put together, which I don't think has been published yet. And I was in my office, 8 o'clock Friday night, reading, and it spoke about a 48-year-old man, Aboriginal man with cancer. And here I was 48 then, and I was crying reading this paper. Now maybe I was crying because it's Friday night, 8 o'clock, and I'm still reading. But while everyone else here is out partying, but when I read 48 Aboriginal men with cancer, things changed for me. Okay? And that's the sort of thing that doesn't, like you'll see age groups in the quantitative data, but when you read the man's story, and of course with the men you have families attached to the men, and you can think of all the sorts of implications of that. Anyway, I'm not going to go over all those papers, but I just want to talk about one which we'll be talking about a little later on too. Let me read this bit here. Awareness, knowledge and experience of cancer were largely absent from people's lives and experiences until they were diagnosed, illustrating the need for cancer awareness raising among Aboriginal people, communities and services. Now, as I said earlier, most of us here, we're well educated, and even if we haven't had cancer ourselves, we have a pretty good idea of, what it's about, the problems and how it impacts on families and what the treatment options and all that sort of thing are. For Indigenous people, for a lot of Indigenous people, there's that lack of awareness. They don't have the health literacy. And so one of the challenges for us is, what can we do to turn that around? So at the end of this presentation, we'll have some questions, which, because we have a team of experts here, and that'll be one of the questions we'll be talking about, health literacy, raising awareness, and that sort of thing. So that's all I want to say. Again, just emphasising that for a topic like this, cancer in Aboriginal people, the qualitative component, it was very, very vital and opened my eyes to a lot of things.
So I'm going to talk now about what we call the Pathways to Diagnosis study, which again, we looked just then about the patterns of care, so we're looking from diagnosis onwards, looked at what were possible barriers that we can measure from an epidemiological or statistical point of view. We're now looking backwards though, and trying to think about, for people who were diagnosed, what do they feel were the barriers and enablers to getting care for their cancer, or getting diagnosed really for their cancer. Now as part of this Pathways to Diagnosis, we engaged a researcher, a psychological researcher from University of New South Wales, and he developed this scale, because there's nothing around at the time to try and measure this, because we'd have that evidence from those papers, the qualitative papers, that there was some sort of cultural barrier, or some sort of barrier to care that wasn't measurable by things like distance or age or spread of disease. There's something else there about the way that Aboriginal people perceive cancer or perceive treatment that we really needed to try and understand, try and measure in some way. So he developed this scale based on other work that had been done in non-English speaking background people at the University of Sydney, and adapted it for Aboriginal people. We also tried to measure these other demographic variables, and then we tried to use this scale, which is now called ACE, it's a nice acronym, and try and understand whether it was associated with things like awareness of cancer symptoms, of attendance to screening, pre-diagnosis use of health services, and delays to starts of treatment. Our friend at the University of New South Wales, Patrick, he came up with this model, which I'm sure you understand a lot more than I do. But it's about stages of change, about the way that people would go about being diagnosed with cancer. So they'd start off with being aware of a problem, then they'd have some sort of motivation to get diagnosed, and that would be a balance of whether they thought they could get some sort of benefit from it, as well as whether they thought that there was some sort of harm as well. And then they would need some sort of resources then to get diagnosed, and then from then on they would begin to engage with the medical system, and we assume would then just keep going once they got into the medical system. That's the anecdotal evidence we'd had at the time. And if you have any questions about this, please ask Anthony.
I'll make up something.
So our participants, we got them from New South Wales hospitals and clinical cancer registries. They were diagnosed between 2010 and 2013, and they had to be 18 years or over when they were diagnosed. We did a telephone-based questionnaire with trained Aboriginal interviewers. We had 277 potential participants, but almost half of them we couldn't contact. Right? So these are people who'd been diagnosed in the last 18 months, had given their contact details to the hospital. We tried to contact them, but we just couldn't get them. The phones didn't ring, or the phones weren't answered, and so we just couldn't get in contact with them. Once we were able to get in contact with them, with about 138 of them, 132 were able to be included into the study. So it's about 74% response rate, if you want to put it that way. So this ACE item, it was three.
Just to interrupt, Janet Farry, this is what we were talking about, something like this yesterday, a measure for community belonging or whatever you want to call it. So we can look at this and we may be able to use this or modify it or build upon it or something. So it's just a measure of how engaged or how whatever an Aboriginal person feels with the Aboriginal community.
And there were three questions we used. One was, how much do you belong to an Aboriginal community? How much do you have in common with an Aboriginal community? And how much do you interact with an Aboriginal community? And then the ACE was just a mean and values thing. They could answer from 0, not much, 1, somewhat, 2, quite a bit, and 3, a lot. When we look at these things, the mean score for these ones were all, as you can see there, and overall ACE was that. So if everybody answered in the middle, the mean would have been 1.5, so it's slightly above that mean. And we did, so in fact in our sample, 63% had a score above the halfway mark and 37% below. And we had contacts out for 182, which I'm told is good. But not too good. When you look at ACE compared to demographic factors, ACE scores are actually remarkably similar by age, sex, place of residence, education level, and relationship status and diagnosis. So we had a feeling that ACE might be somehow related to, older people might feel more part of the community, or younger people might, or if you live in the country, you might feel more part of the community. But in fact, none of those things were true. The only thing we found a slight association was between the type of employment you were in at the time, and again, we couldn't really find any reason for that, but that's maybe just an anomaly of the sample.
Bit of noise.
We then also had this, I guess, in terms of trying to find out whether ACE actually measured what we thought we were measuring, we sort of thought that if you had a high ACE score, you were more likely to go to ACCHS is Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Service. So if you've got a high score, you're more engaged with the community, therefore you're more likely to go to the Aboriginal Community Service. If you have a lower score, you're probably less likely to, you're more likely to go to a GP, a non-ACCHS, ACHS they call it, ACHS GP. Again, we expected that you would be less likely to trust non-Aboriginal people and less likely to trust non-Aboriginal organisations if you had a high score, or if you had a low score, vice versa. And when we actually did the study, we found that they were actually all true. In fact, we found the associations in the right direction, and they were significant, all except for the second last one. When we looked at associated with ACE and other cancer pathways variables, we found, interestingly, that people with a lower score, people who are less engaged with their community, were more likely to be aware of a problem with their body before diagnosis. So again, this may come from that idea of a lower health literacy, or a lower awareness of what a cancer symptom might be. But in terms of prognosis to treatment, whether they had a screening test or not, or whether they went to hospital, there wasn't any real association.
So if I just talk to that one, if we flip that around and look at those who have a higher ACE score, who are more engaged, feel more belonging to an Aboriginal community, that then says that they're less aware, and the reason for that, I don't know, we were only guessing before. It could be that if you're more engaged in the Aboriginal community, maybe you've got other competing priorities, you're less likely to take care of yourself because of all these other things. You might, health issues you could take less seriously about yourself, we were guessing, but I think it's certainly something worthy of a further investigation, because at the end of the day we want Indigenous people to take a lot of care and interest in their bodies.
And it was certainly, yes, a surprising result. So in conclusion, we felt that ACE might be a useful proxy measure for cultural differences, and maybe a measure of, remember the prostate cancer day, we had all that at the end, the difference in mortality we could explain by the normal sorts of demographic and clinical variables that we could measure. So maybe it needs something to do with these cultural differences, and maybe ACE is a way of measuring this. It may also be useful in identifying people before they're diagnosed, in terms of people that might need extra help or extra information, or different sorts of information, or different sources of support to help people who have a lower score. And I guess really one of the limitations we have is we're only able to sample people who've been to hospital. So these are people who have already gone through the process, had already made that first step to get into the engagement with the health system. I guess in some ways we're most interested in people who don't make it that far.
Yeah, in addition to those who...
And as well as people who are healthy, and whether they're more or less likely to access health services if something happens.
But if the community isn't aware and isn't supportive of the getting treatment and things like that, then a sense of involvement with the community isn't likely to have an impact on some of the things that you're looking at. I mean, you have to change the community before having an involvement with the community is going to make a difference.
Yeah, I think it's more, you look at me. I think it's an idea that we have that trying to change the individual rather than the community. I mean, just being able to somehow place a measure on the individual that we'd be able to look after them regardless of what's happening in the community.
Classic medical model.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing is, it's hard. We don't have any power over what happens to the community. We can influence the person who's standing in front of us.
Well, sure you do. I mean, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
That's what education is about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Community empowerment, yeah.
But it's a tricky one because, you pointed out yourself that with this particular form of cancer, it's dubious. The treatment issues and so forth are questionable anyhow.
Yeah. So that was just one example.
Yeah.
In fact, it's typical of all the cancers that we get to a stage where we can't explain a significant amount of the difference in survival. So it's a similar lung, breast, colorectal. So it's not a big prostate because it's an interesting one, but there's the issues are the same across the board. And in fact, across the country, we get very similar results in Queensland as well, and the other states where they've done good work. They get the same thing where they can explain most of it or some of it, but then for others it's just we don't know. So in terms of questions, we had a few questions we could go through, which may you can choose any of these or have your own, but we're trying to think about what other things can be done to help improve health literacy. Maybe that's part of the point that you brought up, other than through formal education.
One of the reasons why we come up with that question was here at IPPE, we're big on education. There's no doubt, and in the Indigenous literature, we know that education is what opens the doors for people. But we know that there's, as in other populations, there's a significant proportion of people who don't have formal education. They're in their 20s and 30s and they're not likely to go back to school or whatever. And so what can we do to raise their health literacy so that they know about how to take care of themselves and what the healthy options are and all that sort of thing. So it's one thing to have promotional campaigns and give the culturally appropriate brochures and that to people. So yeah, it's good to hand over from our end, but from the person's end, what can be done such that they have this awareness, have this greater health literacy?
Do you want me to go through them? Or?
Yeah.
How can we show that cancer is not a death sentence? That's one of the big things that comes up. Certainly in anecdotal evidence is that the reason people don't seek treatment is because they think of cancer as a death sentence. They only see people go away to treatment and then never come back. Or when they come back, they look worse than they went away. And so often there's a very negative connotation to having cancer.
Just on that one, when I did surveys in Queensland Health many years ago, we were asking women about screening, and for those who choose not to, one of the main reasons was don't want to know about it. And I know for myself personally, when I'm supposed to go get my blood test, blood sugar, and that it happens months after I should get it, because for months and months I'm saying, I really don't want to. I already know what it's going to be like, but I don't want it confirmed for me. So that irrational fear of, and it's silly to think, I don't want to know, but if you do know, you can then do something about it. But we're not rational creatures. We're rationalising creatures.
Just two more. How can we evaluate ACE with people who don't access healthcare? So that's the group I talked about. The people who don't access healthcare in some ways have the most to gain from this. And finding, other possible applications of ACE.
Yeah, and just on that third point, that's because ACE was examined on people who had come to the health system.
Correct. Yeah. At least once.
Yeah. So that was our sample.
And I know that our friends from New South Wales Union have actually used ACE in a different condition, and found it actually worked quite well in that as well, in terms of determining whether people access treatment and care.
For our project we're doing, Raj, it's a non-health one. We're looking at Indigenous professionals in the workforce, compared to, say, non-professionals, tradies and that sort of thing. It'd just be interesting to see if a sense of community belonging, support, engagement impacts on, whether how well you do it as a professional, or if you go into a non-professional job or whatever.
It'd also be interesting you could easily translate that into a more generic scale and see whether the sense of community is stronger with Indigenous people than non-Indigenous people. That would be interesting. I mean, my naive assumption is that it would be, but I have no idea of knowing.
For sure.
Yeah.
So they're just some questions we thought we'd put to IPPE. You may want to address any of those or something else, which Raj?
So did you actually measure how many people were referred to an Aboriginal community controlled health service?
No, you couldn't do that really. the data systems out there to capture these sort of things are very poor.
Yeah.
So we tried, not so we didn't try.
Just because obviously that AMS's Aboriginal Medical Services are really important health care providers for Aboriginal communities. So
generally, I mean, and AMS's though, I mean, there's a lot of them, and they're very varied. Some of them are excellent at keeping records and keeping track of these sorts of things. Others are not so much.
But they're autonomous.
And they're all autonomous, and often they have different data systems within, you know, a few kilometres of each other, sort of thing. So it becomes very difficult to. We tried, and often they don't have the expertise or the time really to.
And also because it's community control, data ownership is a crucial issue where they would rather sync than modify their systems or hand over data or something.
It's changing, but it's slow.
So what, patient records and things like that?
Yeah.
Isn't that controlled by New South Wales Health? Or?
No. They're all individual. So we tried, but
which is both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
A curse for researchers, but
yes.
People the clients want to know that they can go there and that data is not going to be passed on to them.
We went to one medical service. Well, it's not too far from here, but I'm not saying what it is. But I said, yeah, we'll help you. You know, we'll be happy to. You know, any records you want, let's go get them. And they got into a room about this size full of paper records. And they go for it. I'm like, 20,000 records.
We've got major issues because AMS's, well, the one in Mount Druitt is about to close. So you've got a huge influx of people that are going to be pushed into the mainstream healthcare service, and a lot of Aboriginal people said they won't seek those services because they don't feel comfortable to go there. So that is a huge problem.
Yeah, it is. It's the problem with Aboriginal medical services is they're always on the brink. You know, and part of the reason we couldn't get data is a lot of the times you go there, there's always a change, there's always a slight, you know, the person you're dealing with this week is not the person you deal with next week. I'm trying to get a continuity, trying to get the relationship going.
And that's the issue with Aboriginal people is building trust and doctors knowing what questions to ask their patients.
We would love to go into the Aboriginal medical services and keep people there, but we just couldn't, and so that's why we went for the hospital model. So we had the contacts there, we had the I guess the data availability there, we didn't have that. That was our original model, was actually logistically became possible.
So first question is the one I'm most interested in, and if we solve that first one, then I think the second question will be taken care of largely. People have ideas of how you can improve Indigenous people, those who have not come through the education system, who don't have a uni or grade 12 education.
Facebook. Putting some promotion on Facebook. Because everybody loves Facebook, and Koori's particularly loved Facebook. Yeah.
It's quicker than the Koori grapevine.
Yeah, it is quicker than the Koori grapevine. That's right, Fabric.
I like that booklet that I was talking to you about before, Raj. The New South Wales Health have produced a book on cancer for Aboriginal people, and it was just anonymous stories about Aboriginal people and their experiences of cancer and treatment, so that people can...
Well, you mentioned that. We've actually put all of our stuff, all of that now on a website, which you've got the link down there. So part of the problem with the booklet is we had when it was originally created, we said, oh, let's create a couple of thousand, that should be heaps. Of course, that went very quickly, and part of the contract with New South Wales Health is we couldn't print any more. So I've only got printed a number, so we've now put it up on the website so people can access it there. And the part was you couldn't get to the people we wanted to, because you ran out of them.
Yeah.
So we've now put that there as well as a bunch of information, including all the results you've seen today as well, on the website as well. So if you wanted to get it. So I guess that's our new model of trying to get information out there. Booklets are great and fantastic, but only if you've got them, and only if you can access them. So,
what about videos? Have you got video extracts of survivors on the website as well?
Yeah. So we have about 8 to 10 of them on there at the moment, all produced using Aboriginal people, Aboriginal faces. There's no non-Aboriginal people in them. Part of the thing we found the qualitative data was, we never heard of anybody surviving cancer. So we've put survivors on and put their stories on, talking about treatment, talking about the things they've experienced, and the fact that they survived, and but everything's okay now. And stuff like that. So, yeah.
What about t-shirts?
What about
Getting t-shirts out in the community. Everyone loves a t-shirt.
I beat cancer.
And people wear them, and it promotes the message. And they're usually free, and the kids go, great, free clothes.
Sorry, no t-shirts.
We'll wrap that up. Could you join in thanking my colleague Raj?